It's been a while, but hey, um, at least it technically hasn't been 6 months. At least by the time I'm recording this. I've been trying to record this for a while, but I've been busy and not in the best environments to actually record it either. But I have the script now. I'm in a more quiet place, so let's see what we can do. Izuku Midoriya was born quirkless, and he was perfectly content with that. Well, not completely. He was a little disappointed that it meant he could never become a hero, but he grew to accept that from very early on, and learned that there were other avenues that he could pursue. One of these, of course, becoming a scientist. Izuku had always been interested in the science behind quirks. He never had one himself, but he found himself having a deeper understanding for the functionality of certain quirks more than their own users. He had a rather high intellect as well, a high enough intellect that could even rival that of some whose quirks literally gave them an enhanced intellect. Izuku was practically praised for his intelligence growing up as a result. His knowledge in the science department was practically unrivaled, you see, and he was practically gifted in math and science as well. His exceptional talent even managed to land him an internship with a mega corporation by the name of Alchemex as soon as he had reached high school. It only took a year before they decided to even offer him a paid internship and a guarantee of him officially becoming part of the corporation by the time he graduated from high school. Life was going pretty great for Izuku overall. His salary alone was more than what most of his teachers and classmates' parents were making. He hadn't even graduated from high school officially yet by this time either, and because of this, he became cocky. Well, he already was, but this just inflated his ego by leaps and bounds. It wasn't like his teachers could tell him anything since he was at the top of his class after all. Some kids would try to pick on Izuku for being quirkless every now and then, but he would simply point out the fact that despite being quirkless, he was able to land himself in a high position in society with quirk research. On the other hand, most of his classmates wanted to become heroes, but realized that their quirks couldn't get them anywhere close to even being a D-list hero's sidekick. Izuku made a lot of his classmates envy him because of that fact. Once he graduated, Alchemex immediately placed him in a group of individuals that were working on a project of sorts. They were trying to create a super soldier, someone that could eventually become the next All Might. This was a special request from the Hero Public Safety Commission. They recognized that All Might was becoming older, slower, potentially weaker. He was barely active anymore, only being seen performing heroic deeds an hour a day at most. In comparison, when he was just starting, people would tell stories of how he went around fighting villains and saving civilians for 48 hours straight, no sleep whatsoever. The project was meant to make a better version of All Might, someone with more abilities than a hero ever had. He had overwhelming super strength, speed, and durability, sure, but what Alchemex was looking for was something that mimicked the traits of a spider as their first super soldier of sorts. There were stories of there being a vigilante in the beginning of Quirk Society who went by the name of Spider-Man, and he was extremely powerful, having a diverse set of abilities related to a spider, including the ability to, shoot webs that could hold up huge pieces of concrete in mid-air, being able to climb walls, almost unrivaled agility, and some even argued that he had something akin to precognitive sense. It piqued Alchemex's interest. If they could create a super soldier like that and mass produce them on top of that, oh, they would just be, unrivaled. It'd be such a revolutionary achievement that they'd be making history. Throughout their research, of course, Izuku would be shocked, though, when seeing his, colleagues and try to bring in a criminal of sorts. He wasn't even a serious offender of any kind. You see, he was just a streaker, according to information that he read on his file. Not only that, but it appeared to be related to his quirk, shame. The more embarrassed he got, the more powerful he became. Izuku figured that there was probably better ways at using this quirk than streaking to become strong, but that wasn't his concern. What was his concern, though, was the fact that they were using an actual person for the experiment. It didn't appear that he even signed a contract or anything. Izuku wanted to say something against this procedure, but it was already too late. They already went forward with the experiment, and a man died as a result. Seeing this crushed Izuku. He refused to be part of a corporation that would be so quick to kill a person if it meant advancing their research. Sure, Izuku was cocky, but he wasn't a murderer. He wasn't soulless, unlike Alchemex. Izuku decided from that point on he would resign. He would actually make this known to everybody immediately afterwards. But there was an issue. With the type of knowledge that Izuku had, the corporation just couldn't allow him to just leave. Especially if he linked information on their misconduct throughout the years. They would be ruined. One of the top-ranking officials at Alchemex would attempt to manipulate Izuku into staying by poisoning him with a highly addictive drug that would force him to continue taking doses of it for the rest of his life. Alchemex was the only company that legally sold this drug as well. His only two options were to continue to work at Alchemex as a dog, no matter how heinous the experiments became, or find himself going to the black market in order to purchase a drug. Izuku wanted to come up with a third option though. This, of course, being to genetically reset his body. This experiment was sabotaged though by one of his co-workers on the project. They envied his intelligence and wanted to completely get rid of him. They saw him as, the perfect opportunity. By getting rid of Izuku now, they could easily just play it off as if, it were an accident. Even if the company didn't believe their story, the situation Izuku managed to find himself in made killing him off more favorable anyways. Instead of killing him though, something else would happen. Something that would make Izuku the bane of Alchemex's existence for years to come. That being the splicing of Izuku's DNA with that of a spider. He had become the first successful human-spider hybrid, and although he had been able to successfully remove the drug from his body, Izuku found himself in an even bigger predicament. One of the very first things he noticed was that his vision had become stronger, a bit too strong actually. The world around him was so bright that it gave him headaches. The only way to deal with it was by putting on a pair of sunglasses. He also had to deal with now having fangs and talons. He could even shoot webs from his wrists, oddly enough. He could tell that Alchemax had not won, but done this to him. They mutated his DNA and turned him into their little plaything. He wasn't about to go crawling back to them in order to have what they did to him be reversed, though. No, he had way too much pride for that. Instead, what he was going to do was haunt them. He was going to find a way to completely destroy their corporation in order to stop them from continuing to perform these acts against humanity for the sake of science. In order to do that, though, he would first need to get a hang of his new powers. He thought about the ways he could go about testing out his powers until he saw a group of individuals attempt to mug a poor, innocent girl. He hesitated for a second, but eventually decided to step in. He tried to give them a fair warning at first, but one of the goons immediately tried to swing at him right after. Izuku was easily able to dodge them though. In response, Izuku punched them in the chest. It seemed as if he put a little too much strength into that punch though. The goon's chest had collapsed in that moment. They fell to the ground unconscious. This caught the attention of the other goons in this alley. They would begin to gather around Izuku, but one by one, each fell just like the first one. Izuku was a pretty sloppy fighter, so he did find himself sustaining injuries, whether they be stab wounds or being hit by a baseball bat. Some used their quirks in order to make sure their attacks actually hit, since Izuku's reflexes appeared to have been heightened from the experiment gone wrong. In the end, Izuku would have defeated the group of goons by himself. He was bleeding though. He looked over to see the girl he had just saved. She had pink skin, hair, a pair of horns, and appeared to be around this age. She seemed scared. He would clench his side and ask if the girl was okay though. She would slowly nod. After that confirmation, he would tell her to get out of here and call the ambulance. The girl would scramble to her feet and run out to the alley before any of the thugs woke up. Izuku would collapse to his knees. He wasn't used to this. He could feel his vision beginning to leave him. He hoped that the girl called for help as he fell into an unconscious state. By the time he woke up though, he would find himself in a hospital bed. He would take a look at himself, more specifically, the wounds he had sustained from that battle earlier. And sure enough, they had been bandaged up. He turned around to see the girl sitting on a chair, asleep. Was she sitting there the whole time? Actually, not the time, but what time was it even? He reflected on the events of last night and checked to see how he was feeling. To his surprise, he didn't feel that bad. He felt great even. He began to unwrap his bandages out of curiosity, and each of the wounds that he had sustained during that fight were gone now. He didn't realize how much commotion he was making though, and the sudden noise actually woke up the pink girl out of her sleep. Izuku froze when seeing she was awake. She smiled at him though, rubbing her eyes a bit. She would then introduce herself to Izuku and mention how she wanted to thank him personally for saving her last night. Izuku chuckled a bit, mentioning how no thanks was really needed. He was just doing the right thing, that was all. Mina pointed out how people weren't supposed to use their quirks beyond self-defense though. and Izuku would quickly counter her argument with the fact that one of the goons decided to swing at him first. He just gave the dudes a warning beforehand. He was technically still acting within the law. Mina wanted to argue more, but she couldn't come up with any good points. No words came out of her mouth as a result. Izuku would smirk, knowing he had stumped her. He thanked her for calling for the ambulance and staying by his side throughout the night. He appreciated it. He wasn't used to people being so kind to him. Maybe it was because he saved her or because he had powers now. Either way, it felt good. That sort of kindness he really only received from his mother until today. Izuku tried going out of the hospital bed, but Mina would try to stop him. She tried to explain that he was literally stabbed last night. He was in no condition to be getting up out of bed like that. Izuku showed her the area where he was stabbed though. Much to her shock, it was as if it was never there. Izuku explained that he had a bit of a healing factor. He wasn't sure how strong it was since, well, it wasn't like he was gonna go around purposely getting himself injured or anything. It did seem strong enough to at least heal stab wounds though. Mina simply stared in awe. She quickly caught herself though and apologized. She explained that a healing factor like Izuku's would be really useful for a hero. Izuku shrugged. He didn't really have much interest in becoming a hero. He gave up on that dream a long time ago. Mina wanted to question him further, but instead he just got out of the hospital bed and discharged himself after showing that he was fine. Afterwards, he would continue to reflect on last night while on his way home. How much stronger he was, his healing being enhanced now, his senses intensified, even the ability to shoot webs. Izuku's goal now was to learn more about these new powers and to take down Alchemax, but Mina's words continued to ring inside of his head. His abilities could be useful for a hero. He hated to admit it, but she was right. That ship set sail a long time ago though. He wasn't sure if he was even cut out to be a hero. There were people who trained their whole entire lives to become heroes, to have mastered their quirks, to have joined hero schools. He, on the other hand, just got his powers yesterday. The learning curve would be far too steep if he tried to become a hero now. He basically had no chance of getting into UA or Shikitsu University. He also needed to find a new form of income as well, since, he did resign from Alchemax recently, and rather abruptly at that. He kept pondering on what to do until he remembered what happened last night. That's when it finally hit him. Everything made sense now. Even the last guy that Alchemax was basing their super soldier experiment on was a vigilante. Although Izuku didn't want to be going against the law like that, he didn't have many options here. He couldn't be fighting villains barefaced though. He had to hide his identity. Even Mina didn't see all of what he was capable of last night, so she wouldn't be able to deduce that it was him masquerading around as a masked vigilante. He bought himself a condo when he graduated from high school, so he wasn't exactly concerned with his mother discovering his secret either. As soon as he reached home, he went through his closet and tried out a couple of clothes that could possibly be used for his vigilante persona. The most he could come up with though was wearing an oversized red hoodie and a black ski mask. That wasn't going to work in the slightest, though. He would eventually upgrade his wardrobe a bit, but first, he was going to need to find a new job before he went on a spending spree. For the next week, Izuku would be finding himself going through a series of interviews until finally landing a job with Detnerat as one of their scientists for quirk research. He would be working closely with their engineering department. The main reason he was even able to get a job so fast was due to him having previously worked for Alchemex, a close rival of Detnerat. Detnerat was always number 2 to Alchemex, so any former employee of Alchemex, Detnerat would accept with open arms. It did only take a month for Izuku to really get settled into this new job of his. Something he found to be rather convenient about Detnerat, though, was the fact that they allowed their employees to get personalized articles of clothing at a reduced price as well. It was a pretty nice perk and solved his problem of coming up with a costume to masquerade in. Detnerat was also trying to get into the hero support industry, so the materials he had access to were practically unlimited. He lied about his request too, explaining that it was meant for a friend of his who was trying to become a hero and wanted something of the highest quality. Knowing Izuku was working for Detnerat now, it made sense he'd go to Izuku about getting that costume request done. Izuku got the basics of the costume and added to the design over the next 2 months before heading out in the middle of the night to fight crime. This costume of his mimicked the colors of the original Spider Vigilante in a way, but the colors were swapped. Rather than red being the dominant color here, Izuku decided to make blue the more dominant color. He even had the spider symbol colored red as well. Admittedly though, it kinda looked like a skull. He wasn't gifted in the artistic area that much. It wasn't that big of a concern though. He just wanted to make sure the costume had all the necessities. Izuku would find himself beating up a bunch of thugs most nights as his sort of practice. He also began learning how to use his webs in combat. He found that he could restrain his enemies in them and could even swing across the city with them too. How interesting. It didn't take long for him to make a name for himself. People were calling him the Human Arachnid. Not exactly a name that he was going for, but it worked. At least for now. People had differing opinions about him too. Some saw him as a menace to society like all other vigilantes, while others, they respected the fact that he was helping to clean up the city of crime. He was more effective in his methods than most heroes nowadays as well. Certain individuals Izuku found he used a little too much restraint on, critically injuring them and leaving them hospitalized. He felt bad at first until he found out about their criminal history, and after a certain point he realized that certain people, well, they just did not deserve to live. This caused him to become even more infamous among the public. Many heroes showed their disdain towards his actions, and refused to accept him as a real hero. There were a few that understood where the Human Arachnid was coming from, but still didn't agree with his violent acts. Others found his methods to be rather sound. The crime rate was going down because of him. Sure, he was actively breaking the law, but he got results, and that's what they respected the most. People like Eraserhead, well, they were the ones that were in the middle. They were seeing this guy's presence creating a divide in the public. He didn't have a proper opinion of Izuku though. He didn't like the fact that he was willing to beat villains to an inch of their life at times, but at the same time he did get results. That was undeniable. He was making headlines, and conversations about him were even making it into the classroom. He was working at UA as a teacher, where everyone in his class addressed him as Aizawa Sensei. Everything was going smoothly for the last couple of years, even with All Might becoming weaker. But this new guy, he had become a hot topic everywhere. There wasn't a day that went by in his classroom without him hearing a conversation being made about this guy. This class was split on whether this guy really had everyone's best interest in mind with his vigilante actions. Honestly, some were beginning to idolize this guy, while others, they were demanding that he be brought to justice for his criminal activities. Some of his students would even ask him about his thoughts on the human arachnid. To that, Aizawa would simply say he didn't have an opinion about this guy just yet. He didn't want to focus on this guy too much, in all honesty. He had better things to do, like teaching the next generation of heroes. His class had a new lesson today, and that would require them to leave campus. They would be required to go to the USJ in order to conduct proper rescue training. On a bus ride to the USJ, many of the young adults found themselves discussing each other's quirks and who probably would make the best hero. Some saw the blonde with an explosion quirk as a strong contender for having one of the most powerful quirks in the whole class. It was very flashy, and he seemed to be rather creative with it too. There was one issue with him though, and that was, well, he was overly aggressive. Some even compared him to the likes of Spider-Man. At least that was the name some of them were calling him by. It just seemed more catchy to them. Bakugo and Spider-Man were seen as polar opposites when it came on to the way in which they acted. Bakugo was loud and aggressive, while Spider-Man, he was more on the witty side, trying to crack jokes in the middle of a fight. Some of the students liked his sense of humor, but others found it to be a disgrace towards all heroes out there that put their lives on the line daily. It didn't help that he was a vigilante either. This was especially pointed out by a fairly tall boy with engines sticking out of his calves. His name was Tenya Ida. This would actually cause for Mina to snap hearing this. He kept bringing up that point on the daily, and she brought up how he would never acknowledge the good that the vigilante brought. He was a vigilante, sure, but he was also bringing down the crime rates. Ida countered their point though by mentioning how he critically injured some of the criminals, permanently crippling them. Mina was fuming at this point. She brought up how each of the villains he crippled deserved it, one looking at their cases, one with arson, burning buildings with several people in it, another kidnapped people their age and younger, burying them alive and leaving them to suffocate. Ida still refused to give Spider-Man any credit for his actions though, simply saying that he was no better than any of the other villains out there. Mina rolled her eyes in annoyance, exhausted from this conversation. Some agreed with Mina while others agreed with Ida. Once more the class was split on the web slinger. When the students made it to USJ, they found themselves meeting the one and only space hero 13. Ochako, a brown-haired girl with an anti-gravity quirk, was exhilarated seeing the hero. 13 was apparently her favorite hero out of the whole bunch, and she even modeled her hero costume after them. While going over the instructions for the exercise, a red-haired boy with spiky hair noticed something out of the ordinary. It looked like a dark portal was starting to form, and he noticed the appearance from the corner of his eye and got excited when he thought that they were going to be dealing with fake villains as well. He accidentally blurted it out, which caught the attention of Aizawa. He looked over to Kiroshima's direction, only to realize what was happening. Those weren't fake villains. No. These were real villains, and they managed to invade the USA. Aizawa would immediately tell everyone to get back, as he did his best to defend against the villains here. He even told Ida to run away and go get help. The villains would outnumber the heroes and students, so they needed all the backup that they could get. And although most of the students were able to defend themselves against the onslaught of villains, some were not as lucky. You see, Suyu, a girl with a frog quirk, and Minato, a parrot with purple spheres on his head for a quirk, were killed by the villains in their area. Aizawa had done his best to take down as many villains as possible, but there was one he could not defeat in pure combat alone. Aizawa had done everything, but this guy just completely dominated him. This guy was tall, muscular, had an exposed brain, a beak for a mouth, and empty-looking eyes. They grabbed Aizawa's head and slammed it into the pavement. Aizawa had been sure he erased this guy's quirk before, though. The only explanation here was that this guy was just naturally this strong. It was inhuman how strong they were. A man with hands all over his body walked over and kneeled down to be on eye level with Aizawa. He would introduce his little friend to Aizawa, calling them Nomu. They were specifically designed to kill All Might, and they'd been waiting out the clock, watching as All Might got weaker over time. They were disappointed that the hero wasn't here on the trip with the rest of the students, but they planned on having their fun still by killing everyone here. That is, if All Might didn't come soon enough. Some of the students were already dead too, according to this weird hand dude. Shigaraki ordered for the Nomu to kill Aizawa and then put an end to the rest of the students in the vicinity after he was done with him. With these instructions being made clear, the Nomu began to bash Aizawa's head into the pavement over and over again. After a certain point, Aizawa began to see black spots appear in his vision. He couldn't afford to die here. He cursed to himself, wondering where Ida was with the recruitment. For a moment he thought he was genuinely going to die here. That was until he heard a familiar voice. His vision was hazy, so he couldn't properly make out what he saw, but the voice was all too recognizable to not know who was here. Spider-Man. The web-slinging vigilante immediately sucker-punched Shigaraki, dislocating his jaw. For the longest, he had been holding back his strength in most fights, but this one was different. He needed to put an end to as many villains as possible. It seemed as if these guys were all out for blood. He refused to let these guys get what they wanted, though. His fast reflexes were able to help him avoid attacks from several villains. Even for the few that he wasn't able to avoid, though, his healing factor kicked in, keeping him in working condition. He was relentless with his brutal assault on the villains. He even used his talons to claw at some of them. Eventually, he would reach Shigaraki. Well, again. Izuku was too fast for Shigaraki to even land a single attack on him, but he had Nomu to protect him though. That first shot was just a lucky. They quickly appeared in front of Izuku, blocking his attack at Shigaraki, and they had completely tanked Izuku's punch, surprising the young vigilante. He knew he pulled his punches in a fight to avoid killing his opponents, but this guy had a very creepy aura to him. He could tell that he would have to try harder here. He was going to have to hold back even less here in order to put this giant down. Several punches later, and this guy was still standing strong. This This shocked Izuku. Shigaraki began to boast about the fact that the Nomu was specifically designed to kill All Might. There would be no way someone like him would be able to permanently put him down. He would even brag about the quakes they were given. Hearing this would actually give Izuku flashbacks to the day he realized how corrupt Alchemax was. Experimenting on human beings like this, he found to be inhumane. That guy died due to Alchemax's greed. Izuku looked up at the Nomu and realized something. This guy, he was probably already dead a long time ago from the experimentation. It was just a flesh puppet that he was fighting now. Izuku tightened his fists in anger. Shigaraki laughed seeing this. It was as if this guy didn't understand the words that were coming out of his mouth. Izuku understood everything crystal clear though. In response, he completely stopped holding back. This was just a corpse after all. He wasn't killing anyone. He released all of his fury on the Nomu, showing swift movements and tricks to stop them from being able to touch him as well. He'd seen what happened to Eraserhead, and he wasn't going to allow that to happen to himself as well. Izuku would begin to push the Nomu back, shocking Shigaraki. He tried to get Kurogiri to do something, but some of the students actually got in the way by grabbing onto a tangible piece of the misty form. Izuku would receive some help in taking out the Nomu in the form of Endeavor's son, Shoto Todoroki, shooting ice at the Nomu. This would spike their regeneration, but at that moment, Izuku would begin to bombard them with a flurry of punches and kicks to overload their shock absorption. Izuku would receive assistance in the form of a yellow-clad spandex-wearing student beginning to fight the Nomu from the back as well. Pause. More students would begin to assist in the fight, completely overloading every last one of their quirks. Izuku would notice Shigaraki trying to sneak away into a portal Kurogiri created. He wouldn't allow him to escape though. He shot a web at the villain, wrapping around their foot. He yanked Shigaraki to him, grabbing him by the heel of his foot. Izuku was enraged looking at Shigaraki. He was going to make sure that this guy suffered for all of his sins to humanity. Before he got the pleasure to do so though, All Might would arrive in order to deal with the mess Shigaraki had created, only to find a multitude of villains gravely injured by the entrance area. They looked over to see Izuku holding up Shigaraki by the heel in silence. He didn't know how to process what he was seeing right now. Some of the students quickly came to Izuku's defense though, explaining how he actually took down most of these villains, saving them. Others remained silent. A portal would appear right below Shigaraki, trying to help him escape once more. Shigaraki, seeing this, would try to trigger Izuku into letting go of him. Instead, Izuku would crush Shigaraki's hand. He'd pull his mask up to reveal his fangs. He would bite down on Shigaraki's calf, injecting a venom into the villain. Shigaraki would then go limp afterwards. Izuku would then throw Shigaraki at All Might, explaining that this guy was the mastermind behind all of this. All of what happened today with the invasion on the USJ. He trusted that the hero would know what to do with them. For now, he didn't want any issues with the hero. He only came to help. He encountered the Ingenium lookalike running frantically in the streets and tried figuring out what was going on. They didn't have much time to talk apparently. He said his friends were in danger and he needed to alert the faculty of the raid at the USJ. Naturally, Izuku became curious and he rushed over there to figure out just how bad it was. He didn't mention the fact that he wanted to find out if Mina made it into UA though, and if so, was she also caught up in the crossfire? All Might wanted to stop the vigilante, but he decided what am I saying? But he decided to let him go this once, since he provided more help to the students than he did. Not only that, but he was running on fumes right now. He had already used up his hour in this form and was struggling to maintain this form for much longer. Other heroes arrived on the scene once Izuku left and helped All Might with cleanup duty. The invasion on the USJ was all over the news. The deaths of the 2 UA students made headlines. Hearing this made Izuku sick to his stomach. If only he had made it there earlier, he could have potentially prevented their deaths too. Their teacher, Eraserhead, was also apparently in a coma. With their deaths, the sports festival had been cancelled. The UA staff were under investigation and the school was shut down for a while. Izuku began to go into investigation mode in order to find out more about the culprits behind the USJ invasion, especially when it came on to the likes of Shigaraki. He wished he didn't let the heroes take him, or else he could have interrogated him on everything that happened and what was the meaning behind the monster he created. He spent several nights looking into these guys. He would swing through the city, taking down villains left and right in order to see if they had any connections to what happened at the USJ. This brutality since that day had become far worse. Some of these villains were being placed in comas because of Izuku. Common street thugs would be petrified when they saw Spider-Man at this point in time. Unfortunately, all Izuku ended up getting were dead ends. His performance at work was beginning to go down due to the sleepless nights as well. He'd eventually find himself at risk of potentially being fired. He was forced to give up his late night operations, at least for now anyways. He needed a break though. His stress was getting the better of him. His hair had even begun to thin. He was too young to go bald. He would take this little break of his in order to clear his mind, clear his head. He would go on a late night stroll in order to actually begin to enjoy life again. While on this little stroll of his though, he would actually bump into Mina again while she was with a couple of her friends. She seemed happy. That was good. She was surprised to see Izuku again and would greet him with a bright smile on her face. Her friends would ask about him, to which Mina would explain that Izuku actually saved her one night, but they hadn't been in contact since. This was the first time she had seen him in a while. She wanted to stay in contact with Izuku this time around though, and the two would go on to exchange numbers. Mina would explain to Izuku that she was in the middle of shopping with their friends, but she wanted to get coffee with him one day, talk about life, and find out more about each other. Izuku agreed to it, and the two would plan out a coffee date with each other a week later. Once they met up with each other, the two found themselves in a long conversation about what's been going on in their lives. Izuku pretended to be surprised about certain parts of Mina's story, since it would be a bit suspicious if he knew. After all, some of her stories didn't make it to the news after all. Spider-Man may have been monitoring UA and ridding the streets of crime, but Mina didn't know about his alter ego. As far as she was concerned, Izuku and Spider-Man, well, they were two separate people. Mina would be amazed to hear Izuku was working at Detnerat though. It was a rather high-profile organization, and they didn't just allow anyone to work there. Izuku but he took a bit of pride in that. Their conversation would have gone on for longer, but Mina would get an alert on her phone informing her of the fact that she was late to her hero internship. Mina panicked seeing this, and she would apologize to Izuku, explaining that she had to leave. Izuku smiled as he waved goodbye to her. Izuku felt pretty refreshed after that conversation with Mina though. She made him feel warm inside for some reason. Maybe that was the coffee though. He wasn't quite sure. Izuku would leave and decide to go sightseeing for the rest of the day. He had a day off from work after all, and while strolling he would end up bumping into a little girl with white hair and bandages around her arms, running away from something. He wasn't quite sure what she was running away though from. Izuku would just question what was wrong, only for a man with short brown hair and a plague doctor mask to come out of an alleyway. He would introduce himself as the girl's father and explain that she would often run away in order to escape punishment for her bad behavior. Izuku would look at the bandages once more and question what was the meaning behind them. Chisaki would explain that, well, she was very clumsy. Izuku wasn't buying it though, and glared behind his glasses. Izuku would offer to take her to the hospital so that they could take a closer look at her though. If it was just her being clumsy, well, they could probably easily treat her. Izuku would even offer to pay for the hospital bills if they were too expensive for them. Chisaki immediately did not like this guy. He was getting antsy now. Chisaki began to slowly remove his glasses, while saying meaningless words. He could feel the girl begin to wiggle around, trying to escape his clutch now. It felt like she had fear for what would happen to him though. This signaled that this guy was bad news, and in response, Izuku would distract Chisaki by asking if that was All Might behind him. Izuku would quickly web up Chisaki's hands and feet before running away with Eri. He would take her to a hospital to get her examined. Sure enough, she was riddled with scars all along her arms and legs. Izuku cursed to himself internally. He clenched his jaw and balled his fists in fury. That guy who claimed to be her father was horrible. He was going to find him and put him to justice. He first went to the original location where he webbed him up, but it appeared as if he escaped. Izuku got a call from the hospital right after too. Apparently, this girl had no known family whatsoever. She was a complete mystery. How great. This guy covered his tracks well. He wasn't going to let her just go to some orphanage or anything either. No. Instead, he had some experience in there. And, well, it was not pleasant. He told the hospital that he'd be willing to adopt the girl if she really had no family whatsoever. He made enough money to support a kid after all. He may have been young, but he was in a better position than most adults twice his age. After looking through his record, they found Izuku to have a clean record, never being convicted of any crimes, and after a few days, Eri was officially in his custody. Izuku would do his best to take care of Eri until he heard about what happened in Hosu on the news in the morning while preparing for work. Another UA student had died. but they died by the hands of the hero killer, Stain. To make matters worse, the villain was still on the loose too. How wonderful. He needed to put a stop to this guy immediately. He had a new goal now. He didn't care about Alchemy X right now. He just cared about making a safe environment for his daughter. He would even call up Mina to babysit the girl, explaining that he had an important business meeting and his babysitter cancelled on him at the last minute. He lied, but what she didn't know would not hurt her. At least that was his justification. Mina wanted an explanation about Eri when he came back though. She also admitted that he had a pretty impressive place though. It made her home look small in comparison. Izuku went on to spend the night trying to find Stain's whereabouts. The last place he was reportedly seen was, Hosu, but he doubted that they would stay solely to one city. He also stuck to alleys as well due to the smaller space that he could use to his advantage. Izuku would run around the city interrogating suspicious-looking characters and stopping crimes of all sorts until he finally got some information on Stain's whereabouts. The villain was too far away for him to do anything though. All he could do was leave an anonymous tip for the heroes and police. He had work in the morning and he couldn't leave Mina with Eri for too long. The girl had a life too after all. Eri was his daughter as well, not hers. Izuku returned to his condo to see Mina and Eri actually asleep on the couch together. He smiled seeing the cute scene. He picked up the little girl and tucked her in the bed. As for Mina, he picked her up as well, tucking her into his bed for the night. He didn't mind sleeping on the couch for the night after all. It was the least that he could do. When Mina woke up the next day, she was surprised to see herself in Izuku's room. Seeing this actually made her panic for a second, thinking that something happened between them last night, but would calm down when further examining the situation. His side of the bed didn't even look touched whatsoever. She did smell a sweet smell though coming from outside. She opened the door to see Izuku cooking breakfast and Eri was already awake, watching TV as well. Izuku, noticing Mina awake, would greet her and offer her some of what he was making. Her mouth watered at what she was seeing. It looked like one of those American movies where the mom would make a big breakfast, only for the kid to say they were running late for school and grab a piece of toast instead. But she, sure enough, was not going to be like one of those kids though. In the middle of the meal though, Mina decided to question Izuku a bit about Eri, to which she would find out and actually be surprised to discover that he actually adopted her. The more Mina learned about Izuku, the more she seemed to like him. She never met someone like Izuku before. He was charming and smart, with a bit of edge to him as well. When Mina looked at the time, she explained that she had to go though. She wanted to chat with Izuku a bit more, but at least she knew where he lived now. She wanted to hang out with him and to start him more. It was a nice change of pace from her hectic life so far since she joined UA. Once Mina left, Izuku saw some breaking news pop up on his phone. Apparently, Stain was still on the loose. He grimaced seeing this. He also got a sudden text message from an unfamiliar number. It said to return Eri at a specific address at 7 p.m. exactly. If not, there would be consequences. Izuku had a feeling that he knew who the messenger was. He wouldn't let them get a hold of his daughter though. The only way he would be able to give Eri a peaceful life though would be through dealing with the Yakuza. By putting them down, they'd no longer be able to even lay a finger on her. He had to formulate a plan, though. There was no way that he could just, rush in head first. Over the next month, Izuku would focus on gathering a task force of sorts. Several vigilantes that could help him take down the Shiosaikai. Some were huge fans of him, practically devout followers that would do anything for him, while others agreed to help out simply because of their own transgression against the villain group. During this time, though, something unexpected would happen. Shigaraki apparently escaped from prison. It wasn't just him either. The prison had been destroyed by some outside force, allowing for several villains to escape and run rampant on the streets. Several heroes were forced to work overtime in order to deal with their escapees. Izuku and Mina had kept in contact during this time, though. It was how he ended up finding out that the girl was going on a trip to a mountain lodge for training purposes. Villains managed to find the location and kidnapped a couple other students, though. Bakugo, a boy by the name of Tokoyami, and Mina were the ones kidnapped. Izuku had been busy trying to help clean up the streets up until now, but he couldn't help but focus his attention onto, saving Mina. There was Bakugo too, and that Tokoyami fellow, but in all honesty, he didn't really have any connection towards the bird guy, and if it were just those two, he would have settled for letting the heroes handle it. Growing up with the Bakugos wasn't the best either. Sure, when it came on to Aunt Mitsuki, she treated him with the utmost love and care after his mother died. But you couldn't say the same for Katsuki. The most they ever did was tolerate each other until they became adults and moved out. If it was Aunt Mitsuki that was kidnapped, without hesitation, he would go to save her, though. The only issue was Eri. He couldn't leave the little girl by herself for very long. In the end, Izuku would decide to leave her with the woman who raised him, explaining that he had a business trip to attend to. He apologized for not visiting them sooner, and only now revealing that he had adopted the little girl that was Eri. Mitsuki would let it slide, though, understanding that he was rather busy nowadays. That, and she was absolutely enamored by the adorableness of the child. Izuku would leave swiftly afterwards, swinging through the city in his Spider-Man outfit. He would interrogate as many villains as possible that could have been associated with the League of Villains. Eventually, he would get some clues towards where the League's hideout was, and with this information, he would head over to the bar that was apparently meant to be their hideout. He would force his way in and see the tied up students. There was a group of villains surrounding them, though. Izuku would evade as many attacks from them as possible while webbing up not webbing up as many, but webbing up a few in the process. Some had webs shot in their face, causing for their vision to leave them momentarily and accidentally attack their comrades. Taking advantage of the commotion, though, Izuku would rip off the restraints from each of the students. Mina and Tokoyami would be grateful towards Spider-Man, while Bakugo, he would just remain silent. The boy would try to escape, but a villain with patches sewn onto his skin would shoot blue flames in their direction. He wasn't going to just allow them to escape just like that. No. But Izuku would just tisk. A familiar voice would make themselves known as well, surprising Izuku. They would even call him by his name, causing Izuku's eyes to widen. The guy that claimed to be Eri's father was here, and he knew his secret identity. He just revealed it to everyone here. He would try to play it off, but the Plague Doctor cosplayer would bring up the whole issue with Eri. He did warn Izuku that if they did not return Eri, bad things would happen. He didn't heed his warnings though. Izuku began to get riled up here. What were they planning to do here exactly? Chisaki would reveal that the Shiosaikai decided to join forces with the League of Villains in order to bring upon a new Age of Swords. They both wanted to remove All Might from the picture, but it wasn't just him. It was Izuku as well. He had been a pest until the very end. He meddled with their plans, and therefore they had no choice but to meddle with his life. He would then pull out a picture of Mitsuki playing with Eri. Izuku and Bakugo would both freeze up seeing this picture. There was no way. Izuku would shoot his weapons at Chisaki, dragging him to be within arm's reach of him. He would grab Chisaki by the collar right after, demanding to know what they had done to his daughter and his aunt. Chisaki would laugh in response. Both of them were aware that Izuku already knew the answer. Izuku was about to snap his neck, but he was forced to dodge a knife throw. It was from a blonde-haired girl, wearing a schoolgirl outfit. Chisaki would smooth out his clothes and begin to slip off his glove, ready to kill Izuku now. Shigaraki was about to charge at Izuku too, ready to decay his throat. They would be interrupted though by a group of heroes charging in with All Might at the forefront. Kamui Woods would then capture the villains that weren't already wrapped up by Izuku. Chisaki would attempt to flee, but Izuku would shoot his weapons at the man. Their efforts would be fruitless though, as a dark substance began to surface from the students' and villains' mouths. Izuku would try to shoot webs at Mina, Tokoyami, and Bakugo in order to pull them towards him, but they disappeared before the webs could even connect. Izuku would express his frustration at the situation and try to leave the hideout in order to find the group. The heroes weren't concerned about the vigilante being there. They had bigger things to worry about, after all. One of these, of course, being the Shiosaikai finally making their appearance known. While the rest of the heroes were occupied with them, Izuku and All Might would each take down their... well, not take down. What I'm trying to say is, they would each take their own form of transportation in order to find the students. While All Might leaped into the sky, Izuku went web-slinging, using the destroyed buildings as a swarm of support to keep him in mid-air. All Might would eventually find himself occupied with the likes of Alpha One, while Izuku would be busy fighting off the League of Villains with the UA students. Mina and Bakugo would do a combo against some of the group, while when it came on to Izuku, let's just say he was forced to stop holding back completely against some of the villains, and he would punch a hole through some of them. Izuku would basically be tag teaming with Tokoyami here, and they could only do so much here. Tokoyami would let his negative emotions fuel Dark Shadow in order to become more of a wrecking ball, overwhelming the rest of the villains. Most of them would be exhausted, but believed to have won this fight. They would try to retreat until they saw the state that All Might was in. He had become a shell of himself. A ghastly skeleton was facing the old evil that was All For One. All For One would mock the hero until Izuku decided to shoot a web at him, shocking All Might. All For One would feel the sticky substance hit his chest and stop his monologue mid-sentence. Izuku would pull All For One towards him, sucker punching him in the jaw. He didn't hold back, but to his surprise, All For One only groaned. He thought he put all his strength into that attack, so how was he even still alive? All For One would then rub his jaw, mentioning how the youngling did pack quite a punch, but just like All Might, it was not enough. A blast to his face would then hit him right after. This, of course, coming from Bakugo. Tokiyami would send Dark Shadow at All For One. Mina would try to evacuate with All Might, but the hero refused to leave. Seeing the new generation of heroes do their best to fight off an old foe, even he struggled to defeat, lit a fire in him, a fire that had long been extinguished. He felt inspired and reinvigorated enough to push past its limits once more. One more time, his frame would suddenly expand as he told Mina to leave without him. He couldn't simply leave while the boys did all the work after all. That wouldn't be a good look for the symbol of peace. He would run towards All For One at full force, yelling at the boys to make room for him. All For One would be surprised to find that All Might even had any strength left in him. He had planned out everything up until now. Was he just holding back? All Might would cock his fist back one more time before yelling out his attack name, grinding All For One's face into the ground, leaving behind a crater. All Might would strike fear into the villains once more by pointing to the camera with a look of determination. There were no words shared this time around, though. He wasn't smiling either. This was a signal to everyone out there that there was always going to be someone to protect the innocent. The villains would be in for a rude awakening if they thought they would. The villains would be in for a rude awakening if they thought there would ever be a chance for them to do whatever they wanted without consequence. Izuku would leave in order to find out the current state of Eri and Mitsuki. Bakugo would swiftly leave as well, worried for his mother, once they had taken care of All For One. The two would make it back to Mitsuki's house, only to find police surrounding the area. A few villains would be seen being taken into custody. Some heroes were on the scene as well. Among the heroes was a tall man in a suit and tie. He would approach Izuku and Bakugo before introducing himself as Sir Night-Eye. He would let Izuku know that he was aware of his secret identity and wanted to take him into questioning. If he was willing to do so, the heroes would make sure to take good care of Eri. While under their watch, they could guarantee her safety. Bakugo's mother would also be under the extra protection of the heroes as well. She would be a bit more free due to her being a fully grown woman with a non-lethal quirk, but due to her connection to the two, some precautions would naturally be taken into consideration. Bakugo would just be relieved that his mother was alright. Izuku, on the other hand, would be silent for a second before stretching out his arms, accepting his fate. Core-canceling handcuffs would be placed on Izuku as he was escorted to the police station and held for questioning. While there, he would take advantage of the situation though, revealing the truth about Alchemax. Detective Naomasa would be there to confirm that everything Izuku told was true. After gathering some more evidence against Alchemax, the corporation would be hit with several lawsuits for going against ethics multiple times over. Izuku would rot in a prison cell for the time being though. He would be sentenced to a year in prison for his vigilantism. He could accept that fate. Once the sentence was up, he would be freed from his prison cell with the opportunity to take the hero license exam and become an official hero. Izuku would smile hearing this and agree to it. After passing the exam, he would be reunited with Eri and Mitsuki. He would find out that Mina visited the two every day while Izuku was in prison. She wanted to visit Izuku too, but she was denied every time for some reason. It was fine though, because the two were able to make up for lost times afterwards. One day, while patrolling the city, Izuku would receive a text message from Minato. This message simply saying that she was pregnant. At least, this is how Izuku hoped things would have went. Unfortunately, he didn't make it in time to save Mina. No. You see, what ended up happening was that the villains decided to kill Mina off due to her connection to Izuku. By the time he reached there, he had seen her corpse and went ballistic on the villains. The heroes would try to restrain Izuku, trying to calm him down, but it was near impossible. Things only got worse when they revealed the fact that they had also killed Eri and Mitsuki. Seeing this, Izuku decided to fight Chisaki. He punched a hole through him, killing him on the spot. He didn't even have a chance to use his quake. Bakugo would be furious as well, seeing what happened to his mother, seeing what happened because of Izuku. He absolutely despised Izuku for what had just happened. The heroes went somber. They knew that they couldn't do anything to help. Honestly, Izuku didn't want to believe this, especially with how much they wanted Eri, the villains, the Shirasaikai, to the point where they even threatened him over the phone. They did everything in their power to get Eri, and then just decide to kill her. It just seemed too simple. And he trying to calm down and really think things through. And eventually, he would end up helping with the rest of the heroes when it came on to dealing with the villains, especially in likes of All For One. Sure, he did contribute to helping All Might defeat All For One, but his concerns were elsewhere. He couldn't help but think about whether it was true that Mitsuki and Eri were dead. Mina was already dead, so maybe there was a chance that they didn't actually kill them, or maybe they did. Maybe he was just thinking wishfully. Maybe he was just having too much of an optimistic look. By the time we reached there, though, alongside Bakugo Katsuki, they would see the bloody corpse of Mitsuki though, but Eri, she was missing. He figured that this was the case, and for 6 months straight afterwards, Izuku would not stop until he found Eri. He would go on to take down several villains. He would beat them to an inch of their life. He would gain an even more heinous reputation than ever before. He had basically lost everything. And the people, the heroes more specifically, knew his identity. He was on the run for a while, and he wasn't going to stop. The only opportunity he had to stop, though, was when a portal opened up one day, and a man wearing a similar costume to him came out of there. He would introduce himself as Miguel O'Hara. He was his universe's version of Spider-Man. He had found out what happened to Izuku and mentioned how this was not supposed to happen. Well, it was. Unfortunately, that was a bit of a lie. He would reveal to the fact that everything that happened was meant to happen as some form of rules of the universe, something he deemed as a canon event. He didn't like to think about it. He had even tried going into a universe as well. He had a similar life to Izuku. Well, similar enough to where he could understand Izuku's pain. He had tried to have a family. He had gone to a whole universe where he was dead, but his family was alive, only for that universe to just be completely wiped because of his selfish actions. And in all honesty, he regretted them every single day. He would look back at his mistakes, and he would bring up the fact that he was trying to prevent such mistakes from happening to other universes as well, trying to prevent universes from collapsing on themselves because of their interference. And he wanted to offer Izuku a chance of helping him achieve this goal. Help other Spider-Men not have to suffer as much. And to that, Izuku would look back at his reality and realize there was nothing left for him. He couldn't even find Eri anymore. And he would just accept. At this point, he had accepted that there was a good chance that Eri was dead, but Miguel would promise him that by working with him, they would at least be able to find her one day, and at least put her to rest. Izuku could agree to that, and that is how we end the story.